Look where the ball is. Minshew swinging to get Bruce with the get to. Minshew lost the shot. Puts it back at the 5. He's got a touchdown.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Top 25 Breakdown. Today we have number 10, Washington State, another team in the Pac-12 North that's really good. We've already covered Washington, and we want to cover Oregon, but I don't think we will. Looking at Washington State, though, over the last 4 years, they've been pretty good, especially in the Pac-12. They've gotten a record of 26-10, not to mention an overall record of 37-15. And with Mike Leach's air raid, they're getting better and better every year. So 2019 should see that. But looking at their 2018 schedule or season from last year, they had really good games to Utah and Oregon, but had a really tough loss against USC, getting a blocked field goal late in the game, which kind of stung a little bit for them because that would have started them to at least a 6-0 start.
Right.
So that would have been really good, especially going right before Oregon. And I mean, they won just about every game except for just that USC little bump. It was really good, and they probably would have went 11-0 going into Washington with a lot of momentum, a lot of probably feeling really good about yourself.
Yeah.
But even going in 10-1, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really promising, especially with Mike Leach entering his 8th year. He is 49-40 overall in his tenure there at Washington State, but it's on a positive slope right now, so he's doing really well.
Yeah. So looking at this team, they do return a lot of good pieces, mostly on the defensive front seven and also the offense, just for the whole entire offense. Return pieces like Devontavian Martin, Desmond Patman, Easton Winston, Jameer Calvin, Renard Bell, Willie Taylor, Jahad Woods.
They also bring back a key piece in Abraham Lucas, Matt Borghi, Willie Taylor, Dominic Sivils, a transfer safety in Bryce Beekman, nickel player Skylar Thomas.
So looking at these pieces, they have some really good strengths. I would say the biggest strength for them is receiving core. I think they'd returned 7 of the 8 receivers from last year that all combined for 297 passes and 30 touchdowns in 2018. Outside targets like Devontavian Martin and Desmond Patman lead the group in catches with 69 and 61 respectively, and both can still achieve more in the fall this year.
Both of them combining for about over 1,500 yards.
Right. And also, slot receiver Renard Bell had just 20 receptions, but he turned 5 of those into touchdowns.
He had a little slump year this past year. He did have a better year his first year starting.
Right. And then another receiver that's been getting a lot of praise, a lot of talk, is Kay Woods, a Renji Slaw, who had impressive catches in the spring game. There's not really a lot to add on this receiving core, just because they bring a lot of talent, a lot of depth there,
right.
And also they have an 8-man rotation in that receiver position, so it fits really well for this system. And also whoever the quarterback is, they'll have a lot of weapons.
Right, especially like you said, this air raid system. You need fresh legs. You gotta be ready to go. And just to kind of piggyback off that, I think the strength for me is the majority is the entirety of the offense. They don't lose a lot of players. They do lose one guy on O-line, but that can easily be replaced with the experienced guy they have in Liam Ryan, And this system is more like just a plug and play. You can put any quarterback in, and they're gonna find success in this system as long as they can throw the ball, at least. As long as they can complete passes and they're accurate, the quarterback's gonna flourish. And like you mentioned already, 7 out of 8 rotating receivers do return back for which make the quarterback job much easier.
Right, like you mentioned, the offensive line is another strength. I agree. It was great last year. They only gave up 1 sack every 52 passes, which is basically in total they gave up 13 sacks for the whole year. Like you mentioned, they do have to replace Andre Dillard, but that might be a little tough. But I think they'll be okay because they have 4 starters coming back.
Right. Another strength that I saw on the other side of the ball was actually the pass rush. I think last year they did really well, a really good job with the pass rush. A lot of guys with at least a couple sacks here and there. But this year should be even better, especially with them already having a year underneath their belt. They should be blossoming into a much better pass rush and probably contending for the best pass rush in the Pac-12.
Right, I agree with you. Last year they led the Pac-12 in sacks. 6 of the top 9 tacklers are back, and the pressure should come from just about every spot on the defense. And last year, 14 of Washington State players defensively ended with at least 1 sack.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and they also do bring in a new nose tackle, Lamont McDougal. He looks to be a very interesting player, especially coming from West Virginia. So we'll see how he turns out. Also, Jahad Woods should take over responsibilities from Peyton Puller. who was a very good linebacker there.
Right.
Moving on to concerns, I would say concern is quarterback. Even with the loss of Gardner Minshew, I do think that they'll be fine, but it'll be interesting to see the quarterback battle. Also, is Gage Gabrud ready? I don't know if that's how you say his name, but there's no question he's very talented, and very like mobile and elusive. So I'm wondering if he can actually pick up the playbook that quickly in the short amount of time, especially because this playbook is going to be probably very thick.
Right.
And Mike Leach's offense is going to be a lot of like passing the ball. But if they go with him, they'll have more mobility and elusiveness. But if they go with Anthony Gordon, they'll have someone that has like knowledge of the playbook and has experience with the playbook.
My biggest concern for this team, for this Washington State team, is really going to be more the scheduling. They do face a lot of Pac-12 teams that are looking to be better this year on the road. They do face a Utah team, an Oregon, a Cal team, and a Washington team, all on the road, which could be very hard to really navigate throughout their schedule. And they're all really spread out, so they're going to be seeing a lot of tough environments and where it's really hard to get wins from.
I agree with that. I would think that one of the main contributors to that is their secondary. I think that's another big concern. They lost 3 of the defensive backs from last year to graduation, which is Moulton, Harper, and Dale. There's also been a lot of movement in the secondary that I've seen, so that will be very interesting to watch.
One last concern that I have, which isn't too bad of a concern considering this is an air raid offense. They're not going to be running the ball as much, but the running game will be pretty young. They do lose their starter from last year. They do bring back Max Borghi, who is a sophomore himself, but they do inherit Deion McIntosh, who was a transfer from EMCC. Who originally was from Notre Dame. So that's just like one of the side kind of concerns where this team isn't going to be focusing on running the ball, but you never know, they might throw in a couple more run plays here and there this year just to take the pressure off of Chase or Anthony or Trey at the quarterback position.
Looking at their 2019 schedule, like you mentioned, they have a lot of really key games in the Pac-12 on the road. Like we mentioned, Utah, Oregon, Cal, Washington.
Yep.
But they do start fairly easy with New Mexico State, Northern Colorado, and then Houston, which is a neutral site, but it's really a home game for Houston. And then UCLA at Utah, a bye. At Arizona State, Colorado, at Oregon, another bye. At California, Stanford, Oregon State, and at Washington, which is going to be really tough to always finish out the season with the Apple Cup.
Right.
But looking at this 2019 schedule, what do you think the worst case scenario is for Washington
Worst
State?
case scenario for this Washington State team, they're still very talented, especially with Mike Leach's air raid system. But I think worst case scenario, if everything falls, if all the chips fall off the table, I'm thinking 8-4. Like I mentioned before, they're facing these very tough road games, and I think they lose all of them. If we're being honest with ourselves here, if all the chips fall off the table, if shit hits the fan, I'm thinking they lose to Utah, they lose to Oregon, they lose to Washington, and they lose the Cal game just because they're tough environments to travel and play at.
Right, yeah, I would say they go 9-3 for my worst case. I do think that they will struggle on the road, especially because they have to go to Utah, at Oregon, at Arizona State, which Arizona State is getting better.
Right.
Also at Washington, I think they lose to Washington for sure. I think they stumble with California just because California showed last year that they could beat Washington. Right. So look out for California. But 9-3, that would be the worst case scenario. Is like they have a lot of good games on the road.
Right.
So what do you think most likely scenario?
My most likely scenario, I'm thinking 9-3 or 10-2. Just to harp back on the four travel games, I think they'll either win one of those or win 2 of those 4 travel games. So I'm thinking they could probably beat the California game, or they could probably beat Oregon or Utah. But I feel really strongly in my heart of hearts that they're not winning that Washington game.
Yeah, most likely I do think you're right. I do think they get at least 10 wins. 10-2, I think they struggle against a Washington team, a very good Washington team, and I think that they might lose to Oregon or a Utah because the Utah is getting better. Oregon, we'll see what they are because there's a lot of hype around them.
A lot of hype.
So we'll see that. But I do think 10-2 is what I think they'll go.
Yeah.
But what do you think best case scenario is?
Best case scenario, and then it's probably going to upset a lot of Washington State fans. I'm thinking they go 11-1 and they lose to Washington at Washington. I just think Washington State's still going to be, and they're going to stay little brother to Washington. I think they can go 11-0 all the way leading up to the Apple Cup. They get over to Washington and they take their L, and they don't get a spot in the Pac-12 championship game, and you miss out on the playoff. If this is a 13-0 Washington State team that's killing teams by putting 50-60 on the board, they could probably making arguments to get into the playoff. But I'm sorry, I think you're losing at Washington, and that's your last game of the regular season.
I do think, yeah, I think best case scenario is another 11-1, or would be an 11-1. They are very good offensively. The biggest question is defense. Can they stop teams? Can they prevent big plays? Especially on that secondary, that's kind of like almost rebuilding to a point. So I do think that they would go 11-0 before Washington, then lose to Washington. I just think that Washington is probably the best team in the North. So. But that Pac-12 North, man, it's so good.
It's getting better. It's getting a lot better. I'm kind of hoping that the Pac-12 South can kind of keep up, or you know, get with the program here. Because right now, I think Utah is the only one that can really, that's going to win the South and going to keep competing for the Pac-12 South in these future conference championship games.
Right. Yeah. There's not really many contributors in like the or contenders in the Pac-12 South. I would say maybe a USC.
For me, I think USC can come back and be that old school 2005, 2006 USC if they get rid of Clay Helton.
Yeah, possibly. But thanks guys for watching this video. If you guys liked it, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe because it helps us out. And comment below. Tell us what you think of Washington State. And can they beat Washington? Thanks guys.